channel, Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Saturday morning, 32 minutes past the hour of 11 a.m. to once again go over what we do expect to come throughout the course of the weekend. For those of you that made up part of last night's conversation, thank you so much for making it a point to be with us always on every single occasion that whenever you get that notification that we have gone live, for you to find the moment to spare the time to be with us and engage with us. We do appreciate that a great deal. Also, yesterday, we did put out our views on the news regarding Manchester United officially announcing that they will be parting ways with Casemiro at the end of the season after a 4-year spell at Old Trafford. And yeah, very, very interesting stuff. So we did put out a video on that. Thank you so much for those of you that have engaged with that video. Those of you that have watched it but have not left a comment, I would always prefer that you leave a comment so that I get your views, your impressions about something. So yeah, but thank you so much for those of you that have taken the time to watch it. This morning, the conversation, like I said, will proceed or continue with what our expectations are going into the weekend, with a big game between Arsenal and Manchester United, but also in the Spanish La Liga, there's a big game between Villarreal and Real Madrid. What makes it a big game is because of the things that Villarreal have been able to do so far this season. They've looked really, really impressive. Of course, in the UEFA Champions League, they've been far from impressive. But in as far as the La Liga is concerned, they've done really, really well. Given their circumstances or budget, because remember they went on to lose some big players, the likes of Tony Barry, the likes of Yeremy Pino, who left and joined Everton and Crystal Palace respectively, but they've done well to stay really, really competitive. Of course, they also made some, well thought signings that have helped them to that regard. So we'll be looking at that and more. Anyways, with that said, I think it's suffice to say, or even better, if we start off with the Spanish La Liga. Now, some reports have come out to suggest that, Alvaro Arbeloa, the Real Madrid, head coach, the interim, has told Alexander Trent-Arnold his last requirements. Those rumors, I've not seen them from concrete sources to take them for gospel truth. But, the adage of there's no smoke without fire, it's not the first time we are hearing those undertones that Alexander Trent-Arnold could leave Real Madrid. And it has nothing to do with his footballing capabilities, but rather the unfortunate circumstances of life, as you'd have them, because ever since he joined them, he's been in and out of the team largely through injury, and he spent majority of his time in Real Madrid colors, on the sidelines through injury. So it doesn't look really, really pretty for him. Real Madrid were really, really impressive in the course of the week when they beat up against Monaco by 6-1. Could have even been more. They themselves could have conceded more, but they do have a very good goalkeeper in Thibaut Courtois, so he was able to save them. We saw a masterclass of a performance from Vinicius Junior. So a very, very beautiful stuff there for Alvaro Arbeloa's command to take through them. So as we speak, Alexander Trent-Arnold is out through a muscular injury. Aurelio Tchouameni will not be part of this game, having accumulated 5 yellow cards, so he's out for disciplinary issues. Eder Militao has a thigh injury, while Ferland Mendy is reported to have a calf injury, so do not expect to see him in today's game. On the side of Real Madrid, you could expect Thibaut Courtois at goal, Alvaro Fernandez, Carreras at left back, Dean Howson alongside Raul Asensio, with Fede Valverde possibly being pulled in to play at right back. Then that midfield could be composed of Eduardo Camavinga at the pivot of it, Jude Bellingham as your number 8, and then Ada Gola playing as your number 10. Yes, in that sort of 4-3-3 kind of system, with the wings being occupied by Vinny Jr. To the left and Franco Mastantuano to the right, while Kylian Mbappe will lead the lines. Rodrigo Goes has been recalled back to the fold of the team, so expect to see him feature, maybe not as a starter, but perhaps as be used as a substitute. Marcelino Garcia Toral is the head coach for Villarreal. There, the Yellow Submarines, who have players like Renato Viega, who they signed from Chelsea, Rafi Marin, Sagi Cardona, Pau Navarro, Nicolas Pepe, Papa Gueye, Papa Gueye showed this one at the Senegalese national team. Danny Parejo, Alberto Moreiro. Then you have Gerard Moreno leading the lines up front, and then Georges Mactades, something like that. Sorry for the mispronunciation of that name. But so it does promise to be a very, very entertaining fixture in itself, because Villarreal, like I said, have had a brilliant season so far in as far as the Spanish La Liga is concerned. With 19 games played, one less than the top two teams, they find themselves in third place with 41 points, 7 points adrift of Real Madrid, who occupy second place. Of course, they are level on points with Atletico de Madrid, who I thought start going into the season would be one of the better sides. I thought Atletico de Madrid would finish above Real Madrid, possibly in second place behind Barcelona, who I predicted will be the eventual champions of the Spanish La Liga to win their 29th accolade of the Spanish La Liga, having won the 28th last season, of course, in Hansi Flick's debut season. So they've done tremendously well for me, Villarreal. Of course, with that game in hand, assuming they were to win it, of course, it's always easier said than done, but assuming they were to win it, that means they would reduce that point deficit to a mere 4 points. So that's what makes today's game really, really crucial. While under Alvaro Arbeloa, it's been 2 out of 2 wins for Alvaro Arbeloa. Their first victory coming against Levante in a 2-0 victory, and then the way they thrashed Monaco by 6-1, you'd expect that Real Madrid are in pole position to win this fixture. But like I said, it's always far from the truth, or always never as easy as it may sound. When Real Madrid met Villarreal in the first stanza or in the first round of this fixture, Real Madrid beat Villarreal by 3-1. While when you go back to last season, Real Madrid still managed to beat Villarreal by home and away by 2-1 and 2-0. The 2-0 at the Santiago Bernabeu, while 2-1 when they visited the Yellow Submarine. So it's a kind of fixture that Real Madrid really, really dominate. The last time Villarreal beat up against Real Madrid was in the 2022-2023 season at the Santiago Bernabeu. They went there and beat Real Madrid by 3-2. So you could think of it that way. While Real Madrid had won the reverse fixture by 3-2 as well. In fact, that season, Villarreal beat Real Madrid home and away, because they beat them by 2-1 when Real Madrid made the trip to the Yellow Submarines, and then when they went away to the Santiago Bernabeu, they also won there by 3-2. But in between there was a round of 16 game in the Copa del Rey, which Real Madrid won by 3-2. So really, it's a fixture that Real Madrid dominate, because when you look at what happened between 2023 and 2024, that campaign, there was a 4-4 draw between the two sides, and then a 4-1 victory for Real Madrid. So the one constant in this fixture is that it does promise to always be a high-scoring fixture. Rarely do you get the 1-0 victory, the 2-0 victory. Usually you expect both teams to score. The last time the two teams met and there was not a single goal in the tie, you have to go back to the 2021-2022 season when both games ended in goalless draws. I do not expect a goalless draw. A draw is a possibility, but it cannot be goalless. If it's going to be a draw, it will be a 2-2 draw. But given what I saw of Real Madrid, how they applied themselves against Monaco, it's not to say they did not give away chances, but they were very, very clinical going forward. I have a feeling that Real Madrid could edge the fixture by 3 goals to 2 at the end of the evening. So really, really impressive stuff for Real Madrid. Maybe, and I say that I remember I'm a Real Madrid fan, so a part of me there is slightly inobjective about Real Madrid, but I have the conviction that they will win the game by that margin of score. But elsewhere in the Spanish La Liga, Vallecano early on at 4 p.m. will take on Osasuna, while Valencia will take on Espanyol, and then Sevilla will be up against Athletic Bilbao. There, Titus Odong says, hi Titus, good morning, good to have you on the broadcast. There, good to have you on the channel. I hope you're doing okay, really. Oh, I forgot to add something for you guys there. Let me update this in a bit. Titus says, good morning to bro. Fine, no problem. All right, that's beautiful to know. Okay. Just updating our poll for you guys to engage. So that's our poll for today. Who will win between Arsenal and Manchester United? That's the question for us. Do give me what your submissions are. Who do you think will win that game on Super Sunday when the two teams meet? Is it Arsenal? Is it Man United? Is it going to be a draw? Remember, the fixture is at the Emirates Stadium, where Arsenal are yet to lose a Premier League fixture this season. It's not to say they cannot lose, but at least so far they haven't lost. About 3 big home games they played there, and actually about 4. They beat up against Aston Villa, they beat up against Tottenham Hotspurs by 4 goals to 1 in each fixture. Then they drew against Manchester City 1-1, and then drew against Liverpool in a goalless draw. So let's in fact proceed with that fixture, because it's the gist of the weekend, albeit at the same time at 8 p.m. On Sunday there will be a game between Juventus and Napoli in the Italian Serie A. Very, very big game, one that you shouldn't miss out. And then later on Sunday there will also be another game between AC Milan and AC Roma in the Italian Serie A. So all those are big games to look for you guys to look forward to in as far as the Italian Serie A is concerned. Those 2 big games, and then in the Premier League, and then we'll just digest the game between Real Madrid and Villarreal. So you can let me know what your thoughts are on that particular fixture by responding to that poll. Good morning, Pedri. How are you doing? Barcelona, Real Oviedo. I will get to that fixture in just a bit, because it's coming on Sunday as well. We started off with Real Madrid, then moved then to Arsenal. Then after that, we'll go to Real Madrid. So please indulge me. We'll go to Barcelona. Please indulge me, Pedri, as we go through that schedule as has been organized. Pedri says 100%. 100% say Arsenal will win. No, the 100% could be from one person who has responded to the poll. So really, contribute to the poll with your thoughts, and at the end of the broadcast, perhaps we'll have a better verdict or a better insight in what you guys think will be, the result for that game between those 2 sides. For the first time this season, like it says in our caption or headline, Arsenal will have a fully fit squad. Now we're talking about a team who arguably have the best squad in the Premier League in terms of balance. In terms of talent for the starting 11, when you talk about the core, maybe you could cite maybe a few key positions here and there where you think, they do not have the absolute best of talents in those roles. But overall, when you look at Arsenal, I do think or contend that they do have arguably the best squad in the Premier League, pound for pound, when it comes to overall squad balance. So that's the team we're talking about. And for the first time this season, they have a fully fit squad. What does that then imply? it means a selection headache for Mikel Arteta. This is a topic that we've discussed before, but particularly our focus was on the strikers. A question, given their performances in midweek against Inter Milan. We saw how Gabriel Jesus was good, how good he was. We saw Victor Gyökeres come off the bench to, to score a brilliant goal. So the question then is, who do you start if you're Mikel Arteta? Do you go with Gabriel Jesus? Do you maintain Victor Gyökeres, who has been the key talisman for who has been a key talisman for the Gunners in as far as this season is concerned? So really, that's how I want us to look at it. That's how I want us to look at it. So when you look at the squad, of course, there are people who, even if they are fully fit, then they're not going to start this game unless something bizarre happens, And by bizarre, I mean unless a player gets injured during the warm-up or something like that. So you have a Tommy Setford, who is a third-choice goalkeeper. You have a Kepa Arrizabalaga, who we know has been used in cup competitions. That's the EFL Cup and the FA Cup. And I have a feeling that we could perhaps get the chance to see Kepa Arrizabalaga in Arsenal colours in the UEFA Champions League next week on Wednesday when they take on Kairat Almaty. So let's just wait and see what Mikel Arteta's choices will be going into that fixture. So, that's in other words, it is what it is, in that case. So then when you look at their right back position, Ben White is available, Jurriën Timber is available. Then when you look at their centre back, figures, Gabriel Magalhaes, William Saliba, Christian Mosquera, they're all available. Then when you look at the left back role, you have Piero Hincapié, you have Ricardo Carafiori, you have Miles Lewis Kelly. They're all available for selection. You get to the midfield where you have, Christian Nogard, Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi, Mikel Merino, Martin Odegaard, Ebeleche Eze, all available. Up front, Leandro Trossard, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Jesus, Victor Gyökeres, Gabriel Martinelli, Noni Madueke, Kai Havertz all are available for selection. So really, it's quite interesting to see what happens in Mikel Arteta's team selection for today's game because he has all those players available. But nonetheless, while he has those players available, for some reason, I have a feeling that we may not see these players either in the matchday squad or even feature, or even if they are in the matchday squad, may not come on in to play. For example, Kai Havertz. This is a player that got injured on the opening weekend of the Premier League. Like I told you guys, all the fixtures for matchday 23 are a replica of the fixtures from the opening weekend of the Premier League. Liverpool against FC Bournemouth. That was the opening game of the season. Brighton Fulham. That's a game that was matchday one. Arsenal Man United was a matchday one fixture. So when Arsenal won the fixture by 2-0. So Kai Havertz comes on as a second half substitute. He gets a knee injury. We thought it was a minor issue, that it wouldn't need surgery. Long story short, he's been out of action ever since then. I think we saw a glimpse of his return and then suddenly he went up in smoke. He's had that injury setback after injury setback. Initially, we had expected to have him back in November. Then he had an injury setback. For those of you that remember, Julian Nagelsmann confirming that during the November international break. Then we thought, maybe December. He did, I think, have a bit of a return. He returned to training, and then something happened. So he went back into rehabilitation. And I think he's been training for the last 2 weeks or so. And he made the bench for the game against Inter Milan, although he was an unused substitute. In fact, by the time Mikel Arteta withdrew Gabriel Jesus for Victor Gyökeres, a lot of people thought maybe it was Kai Havertz that was going to, going to have a kick in there. Mikel Arteta was asked whether Victor Gyökeres and Kai Havertz can play in the same team, and he said, Kai Havertz is a very talented player who can play in different midfield and attacking midfield positions. So, that means it's a possibility. Is it what we are going to see? not the case against Man United. Why? It's his first return. You do not expect him to start. Later on, I have a feeling that he could even be an unused substitute. However, against Kairati Almaty, maybe that's the game in which he gets to have a couple of minutes as Arsenal prepare themselves for the weekend, and after which that weekend of the 31st and 1st of February, we will then have fixtures for the return leg of the EFL Cup semi-finals, for which Arsenal will host Chelsea. So maybe by the time we get to the Chelsea game, he's had a couple of minutes. And also they're trying to manage his game load because they have a feeling that I think ligaments, the issues to do with his ligaments could prove to be a little problematic. So we are waiting to see what how that will look like in the coming days. But expect how should I put it? Expect My expectation is that Kai Havertz may not be featured in this game. Of course, depending on how the game goes, the feelings could be different, or the circumstances could demand for his coming on. But again, unless you're winning comfortably, it may come. Unless you're winning comfortably, it's hard for me to envision that he would be the player that Mikel Arteta calls upon to try and win the game in case things are not happening for him by, let's say, the 75th minute. And the reason I say that is because, let's say you start the game with Gabriel Jesus leading the lines. That means you're better off slotting in an already fit Victor Gyökeres to try and get in behind those defenders as the game turns on. So really, it's a bit of a difficult one. Then when it comes to, if you want to see out the game, let's say you're marginally leading, then maybe you're looking at players like Noni Madueke. Maybe you're looking at players like Mikel Merino, in midfield or even up front, and maybe you're looking at players, even for this particular game. I do not know. Unfortunately, I have a feeling that we may not see Eberechi Eze. And for me, this has nothing to do with the capability or lack of Eberechi Eze as a player, However, I think my reservations about Eberechi Eze are not different from the reservations that I have had with Ethan Nwaneri, because as talented as they are as players, very, very good players, my reservations with them have always been when the team do not have the ball, how they help with the counter press. You oftentimes feel like there's a huge disparity between their commitment when we have the ball and their commitment when we do not have the ball, in terms of how Arsenal apply themselves. So, and again, I don't know, you again realize that ever since ever since Arsenal's 2-1 loss to Aston Villa at Villa Park, you remember when Matty Cash goes in behind and he scores, to give Aston Villa the lead. Eberechi Eze did not track. I don't know whether it was a lapse in concentration or he's just not accustomed to those responsibilities. But ever since then, it's like he's been punished for that incident. That's what it's felt like. Reports have come out to suffice that Mikel Arteta and Eberechi Eze have had numerous meetings, but also I remember back then in defense, Mikel Arteta had said that this is the first time Eberechi Eze had played as many as 22 games at that point in the season, at almost the halfway point in the season. And I was like, oh, all right, fair point, because remember, for a good part, Arsenal did not have Martin Odegaard, the captain. He was out through injury. He had 2 shoulder injuries, and then a meniscus injury to his knee when he clashed with Somerville in that Arsenal's victory against West Ham United. So really, when you look at it that way, you felt that maybe Mikel Arteta had a point, But whereas he had a point, I do not think it's justifiable for all, the games where you should have thought you kind of felt that maybe you should be getting a kick in, and this has been particularly in the Premier League and the UEFA Champions League because in cup competitions he's been a player. He isn't accustomed to tracking at least by observation from his Paris days. That's according to Moscow Joshua. Hi Joshua, good to have you on the broadcast. Joshua and I do participate in the same Arsenal forum, so thank you so much for that comment. So yeah, players like Ebelechi Eze will have to adapt easily in terms of the overall team play, because this Arsenal team has been built on the basis of no one is a star or a standout player to say, I'm not committed to doing that kind of work, the way you had an Eden Hazard at Chelsea, the way you had a one-man matter at Chelsea, the way you have a Lionel Messi, even though he did his fair share bit. I've always said that usually in majority of teams, good or bad, you always have that player who is very talented and does everything right going forward. But when it comes to ball recovery, when they've lost the ball, they're not that good. And teams are accustomed to playing with that sort of figure within the team. And unfortunately, Mikel Arteta has not built his structure for that because he wants everybody to be involved in some form or shape. So his lack of tracking back or his work off the ball, I think, is what in some way has costed him minutes. Same thing has applied to Ethan Nwaneri, because you and I can all agree that Ethan Nwaneri has the legs, he has the talent, he can dribble, he can shoot from distance, he can play that through ball. But when it comes to his off the ball work, that's where you have your reservation, and that's why Mikel Arteta has sent him out on loan to Olympic Marseille to work with former Brighton manager in Roberto Di Zerbi. Let's hope that all goes well. So, while it's a beautiful thing to know that Arsenal, for the first time this season, have a fully fit squad, unfortunately, some players will be omitted from the matchday squad. It's just the reality of having a broad squad, one that you need during an entire season. Two, as good as some players are, they may not get the chance to feature. So, for example, if in the 80th minute you're leading by maybe 2-1, Mikel Arteta may be thinking, I'm better off bringing on another holding midfielder, another defender like Christian Mosquera to try and defend better or control the game, as opposed to maybe giving Kai Havertz a chance or maybe giving Ebelechi a chance, that kind of thing. When you go back to that game that Arsenal won by 3-1 at the Emirates Stadium that involved who was it? I think Marcus Rashford squad. Then was it Odegaard who scored the equalizer? And then you had Arnaldo Garnacho squad, what turned out to be an offside goal, for which Gabriel Magalhaes was praised for his smartness, the way he ducked backwards to get Garnacho offside. And then it took Arsenal the 96th minute to score what would give them all 3 points. And that was the goal scored by Declan Rice. And then eventually, in the 11th minute of stoppage time, Gabriel Jesus scores the third goal. So the result in itself, while showed Arsenal's dominancy, Man United could have easily walked away with the point in that game. And that's been the nature of majority of Arsenal's meetings with Man United over the years. Even though Man United, I think, have not won a game in quite a long time at the Emirates Stadium, I do not think Arsenal fans walk into the Emirates Stadium or walk into their watching arenas thinking this is going to be a very comfortable win. It's never that comfortable. Whether United are in the doldrums, whether the reverse is true, ever since the post-Sir Alex Ferguson era, I do not think Man United fans go into this game thinking, well, it's going to be, game as usual, that we're going to win. I seem to remember, I think this was around 2011, 2010? Around 2011, 2010, thereabout. Arsenal met Manchester United in the FA Cup, and Man United had 7 defenders. They had the twins, Fabio and his twin brother. They had, I think, John Oshie was in that team. Darren Fletcher must have been in that team. I think Vidic made that team, and they had 7 defenders, and yet they still managed to beat Arsenal by 2-0. So they felt like there was this sort of fear factor about that Manchester United team under Sir Alex Ferguson whenever they met up with Arsenal. So that seems to have gone out of the window thanks to Mikel Arteta. So, and while it's not always easy, Arsenal tend to find a way to win. Last season, when you thought, Man United thought, yeah, we're going to give it a good go. And they indeed gave it a good go at the Emirates Stadium. But all it took was 2 corner kicks. Jurriën Timber and William Saliba, they scored, and then Arsenal won the game by 2-0. In fact, when you look at the statistics, I think over the last 5 fixtures or the last 5 meetings between the two sides, you'll find that I think Man United have scored what? 1 goal against Arsenal, because they've been marginal victories, including 1-0 victories. I also make reference to that spell in when you go back. Sorry, Man United have scored 2 goals. Yes, because there was a 1-1 draw last season at Old Trafford. But then you have to go back to that game in September 2023 when Arsenal win 3-1. So I also make a reference to the spell when I emphasize Mikel Arteta, how he has changed the face of this Arsenal side in terms of facing the big teams. When you go back in the 2020-2021 Premier League season, when Mikel Arteta had his first full debut campaign or full season with the Gunners, he had a bad spell of 10 games where he hardly won a fixture. And in that run of fixtures, the only game he won was against Manchester United. They beat Man United by 0-0 at Old Trafford. That penalty scored by Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. And the reason as why I remember that game was Michael Dean was the referee in charge, who was literally known for never awarding penalties to Arsenal against Man United. So that's partly why I remember it. So Mikel Arteta, when he walks into Arsenal, I think one of his objectives, knowing how Arsenal had fallen down the pecking order, one of his objectives was to make his team very competitive in the big games. And that's why there was a period of 2 years when Arsenal have not lost to the Big Six until this season when they lost to Liverpool by 0-0. So that sort of paints for you the picture of how he treats these kinds of games, of how he looks at Manchester United, of how he looks at Chelsea, of how he looks at Manchester City, of how he looks at Liverpool and things like that. So he takes these games really, really seriously. Then Walter Mugabe says, unbeaten run saga, Van Nistelrooy versus Arsenal draw. Again, you have that. Then that's for the historical context for the rivalry. You remember, I think it was Martin Keown who jumped in the face of Ruud van Nistelrooy in that game after he missed the penalty and things like that. And then you have the game that Man United win 4-2 to end Arsenal's unbeaten run of 49 games. Again, for me, every time I watch that game, it reminds me of how biased referees were. It reminds me of how always Manchester United got away with too much in terms of bad refereeing decisions. Because when you go back to that game, possibly Man United get about 2 red cards. Arsenal get a penalty in that game, at least 1. You remember when Roy Carroll removed the ball from after it had crossed the line, and then the referee did not give that when Man United were playing Tottenham Hotspur. So I always felt, when I look back at some of those moments, you always felt that United had this officiation advantage that they did not deserve in a way, but that was the era of it. So this game has a lot of history to it. It's the only game that qualifies for a derby that has no particular name for a derby, unless we can conjure one for it. To say the way you have the Tranmere derby between Newcastle and Sunderland, the way you have the London derby between Chelsea and Arsenal, the way you have the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur, the way you have the Merseyside derby, the El Clasico, the Derby de Clasica between Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich, and all those kinds of things. The way you have the Milan derby in Italy, and the Roma derby between Lazio and AC Roma, and things like that. So in the overall context of this game, Arsenal have no excuses. They have a fully fit squad. Then the question comes down to what kind of selection does Mikel Arteta go with for this particular game if he has a fully fit squad? One, if those players, because usually when players are just returning from injury, it's really hard to gauge whether they are 100% fit to start a game of football. Man City versus Tottenham derby is called what? That's not a derby. That's not a derby. It's become a big game lately, but it's not a derby. So Anyways, if you're Mikel Arteta, you're going to field David Raya, you're going to field William Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, Julian Timber at right back. Then the question is at left back, Piero Hincapi or Ricardo Carafiori. For me, if they are all fit, it's Ricardo Carafiori to start for me. The way he ventures forward and and sometimes inverts in midfield, it's been impressive to watch so far this season. Then when it comes to the midfield, of course, he has a preference to that midfield trio of Ebeleche Eze, Martin Zubimendi, and Martin Odegaard. Of course, at the expense of Ebeleche Eze, whom many Arsenal fans would want to see in the same game. They would rather he plays with one pivot, maybe a Declan Rice or a Zubimendi, and then he plays with Odegaard, and or he plays with Odegaard and Ebeleche Eze in the same team. He tried that in the game against West Ham, which they won by 2-0. But like you all remember, Martin Odegaard was withdrawn before halftime for that meniscus injury when he clashed with Somerville. So we've never had the chance to see it play out when those two are in the same team. Then up front, you expect Bukayo Saka, you expect Leandro Trossard to start. Now the question is who starts between Victor Gyökeres and Gabriel Jesus. For me, for the way Man United operates around Arsenal, I'd go with Gabriel Jesus. First and foremost, Manchester United's tactic versus Arsenal has never changed. They've never wanted to be dominant in that fixture. All they come for is, one, will frustrate them with, tackles and nibbles here and there. That was Sir Alex Ferguson's trademark. Whenever he commanded his team in this fixture, he knew that the likes of Sami Nasri, Francesco Sola Fabregas were always going to give his side a hard time. The way they passed the ball, those one-touch passes, nicked it around, build-up play, impressive. So he relied on players like Darren Fletcher, Park Jin-sung, go and commit a foul here, stop play. Then when we are pressed and we win the ball back, we get to the counter. That's what you should expect on Super Sunday. Michael Carrick is not going to change anything on the blueprint of Manchester United because he played in that team. He knows one too well that it's counter-attacking football that team has oftentimes been built for. And when you have the likes of Brani Mbeumo, Amadou Diallo, Bruno Fernandes, Patrick Togo, these are players with a bit of pace. As soon as they win the ball back, they can get in behind you. And remember, Arsenal play with that high, defense. So I'd go with Gabriel Jesus. One, because of his work rate when it comes to the counter press. You want to keep Harry Maguire and Lisandro Martinez on their toes, and then the way he keeps darting around across the area. Because the way I watched the Manchester City game, Harry Maguire and Lisandro Martinez were able to mark out Brad Erling Haaland. He hardly had a sniff in that game. So Victor Gyökeres could be perhaps an easy target for them to mark out. So when you have a player like Gabriel Jesus, who is not a mainstay in front of the 18 yards box and in and around that area, he darts to either wings, and then they swap roles with Bukayo Saka or Leandro Trossard. Give them that bit of food for thought. Let them, have to deal with that. That for me would be my pick. But again, we'll have to wait and see what the decision will be for Mikel Arteta. Masugwa says, I'm a big critic of how we play with Odegaard in the middle, but for big games, honestly, Odegaard gives us control. Then Jesus says Odegaard is trash. Now, Martin Odegaard seems to be a player that divides opinion among Arsenal fans. Why? Because of the way he plays. And I understand where Arsenal fans are coming from when it comes to that. 6-7. Okay. So I understand that. And the frustration with many Arsenal fans about Martin Odegaard's play is his delay in releasing the ball. I think majority of the contention, that's where that comes from. Because I, for one, have equally watched him, and I feel that in certain moments, he needs that one-touch pass. You receive the ball, play it to the next player, move into space, create yourself space, and move on. And then he holds on to the ball a little longer than he should, and then he kills the moment. Then we've seen some patterns, and I do not know if we are reading too much into it, but it's been, at least from the evidence that we've seen, it's more than a coincidence that Victor Yokeres makes the run and he does not play him in. And by the time he thinks of making the pass, certainly it's late, or he's then become offside, or he's made a stop, and things like that. Now, I do not remember the exact game where they tried to build that and he was playing him quick passes, but on the overall, he holds onto the ball too much. Look at the game against Inter Milan. When Gabriel Martinelli is running with that ball, as soon as he sees Victor Yokeres has made the run, he goes with the outside of his foot for the Trivela pass, and he makes that ball. Victor Yokeres receives it, first runs with it, passes it to Bukayo Saka, who accidentally leaves the ball behind, because I do not think that was an intentional pass. And guess what? Victor Yokeres pounces on it. Then in the Chelsea game, you remember Bukayo Saka, he goes inwards, and instead of crossing that ball quickly for Victor Yokeres to lash onto, he chooses to cut back. And then when he cuts back, eventually passes it to, was it Julian Timber or Ben White? I think it was Ben White, who then makes the cross that Victor Yokeres meets. So there's a bit of frustration with Martin Odegaard's game about that bit. Going forward, when he needs to release the ball quicker. However, I've been impressed with him lately is he's been more intentional on taking shots. They're not always on targets. Many of them have been blocked, but at least he shows that intention that as soon as he sees the space, he wants to try and go for it. And I think that's a very, very good thing about him. Perhaps maybe we can get to see the reincarnation of a Martin Odegaard that we saw back in 2022-2023 campaign. But then he needs to improve on that part of releasing the ball much quicker. Then when he says in the big games, he gives us control. That's true, because sometimes that holding on to the ball is what then Arsenal needs to either calm the tempo down or to raise it, to sort of drive the team, to know when to release the ball and when to hold on to it. So he gives Arsenal a bit of control because he is always asking for the ball. And I remember when Arsenal signed Ebelechi Eze, a lot of people thought that Ebelechi Eze was a replacement for Martin Odegaard, that you'd swap the two players for the same role. Now, it couldn't be it couldn't be far from the truth, because the two players apply themselves differently. Ebelechi Eze's mobility is largely within the forefront of the pitch, whereas when it comes to Martin Odegaard, he is all over the pitch. Sometimes I get frustrated by him when he goes as far back as the centre backs to receive that ball, to drive it forward. And I'm thinking to myself, no, that should be Declan Rice or Martin Zubimendi doing that. Going back, you need to stay in the middle third of the pitch to help the team drive the ball further forward, to help create those penetrative passes. But sometimes he goes too far back behind to collect that ball. But that mobility, again, is then what helps the team in the grand scheme of things. So I want him to stay largely in the middle third of the pitch and leave that wall to Martin Zubimendi and Declan Rice. But because Arsenal play the system that is such like a revolving door, once you are in the team, you do not have a permanent place that you're staying in. Unless you're William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes, the rest of the players are built for mobility, to be flexible. So that midfield trio, you'll find Declan Rice at the edge of the area, waiting for that ball to be received from Martin Odegaard, who ordinarily should be vice versa, that Declan Rice is bringing him the ball. On another occasion, you'll find Martin Zubimendi is the player there, and then Declan Rice has pulled outward. I've also given the example. I make reference to the game against Burnley because this is when I observed this the most. When Arsenal were building up play, their fullbacks moved forward. That was Yuri Timber and Karafiori. They moved higher up the pitch. Then the double pivot of Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi then split outwards. Then they moved to right back and left back respectively to receive the ball from the centre backs. And that's how they build up play. So that talks about the flexibility, because when the fullbacks then move up front, one of them usually inverts into midfield. And then when these guys come in the build-up play, they meet them there, and then maybe Rice or Zubimendi ventures further forward, one stays with one of the fullbacks, like that. So I sort of understand that there's no permanent positions in that sense, but oftentimes I feel Odegaard as much as he wants the ball, he should remain within certain regions of the pitch, depending on where the ball is, as opposed to calling it upon himself to go and pick it off a William Saliba or a Gabriel Magalhaes. So as much as we have reservations over Martin Odegaard, Arsenal will need him in that game. They will need his control. They will need his counter press to help in that game. They need to be more than dominant. They need to create the chances. But for me, that's the team I'd go with. On the side of Manchester United, what kind of picture should we expect? Like I said, it's going to be counter-attacking football. Manchester United are not going to come out and try to dominate the ball in that fixture. In any case, every time they try to dominate, you leave the ball to them, they seem lost of ideas of what to do with majority of the ball. So what they will do is sit back in a way and look to catch Arsenal on the counter-attack. We've talked about the players that they have who have the legs in there. I do not know whether Patrick Dogu will be swapped out for Matthias Cunha, but I thought he was really, really impressive against Manchester City. So in their own squad, against Sonny Lomans in goal, Harry Maguire and Lisandro Martinez is the team that I would expect to start because Matthias De Ligt has been out through injury for quite some time. Nusa Mazraoui is back from AFCON. So it begs the question, is it going to be Nusa Mazraoui at right back or Diego Dalot will return? Is it going to be Luke Shaw at left back, or it will be Nusa Mazraoui playing at left back and then retain Diego Dalot? So there are questions over there. However, if I were in Michael Carrick's shoes, I'd retain Luke Shaw. He's played in a back three, so he gives you the advantage. If you're, let's say, in the attacking phase of the game, that he stays and you have the right back, the one venturing forward. Then on the right back side, again, I would go for Nusa Mazraoui because of his defensive prowess over Diego Dalot. And sometimes, as we've seen, Diego Dalot can sometimes be a bit reckless. On another given day, his tackle against Jeremy Doku could have easily been reviewed into a red card, but they got away with that one. And rightly so, because the replay showed it was more ugly than it was in real time. Then in midfield, Kobbie Mainoo, Casemiro. We've spoken about Casemiro. For those of you that want my extended reviews about Casemiro and why I think Man United are wrong to part ways with him at this point, you should go over to the channel under the video section and watch that video. Oh, okay. I do not agree with that, Jesus. You say I think Hazard is better than Henry in terms of Premier League or being a Premier League player. I totally disagree with that, but it's a difference of opinion. So Casemiro, Kobbie Mainoo in midfield. Then plus, then you have the wings, Patrick Dogu, Amadou Diallo, and then Brandon Mbeumo leading the lines with Bruno Fernandes playing in behind him. Basically, that shape was a bit of a 4-4-2, traditional 4-4-2. You have your back four, you have your midfield two plus the wingers, and then you have the number 10 behind the striker in that way, or playing as a double striker. The way you have Henry and Dennis Bergkamp. Now, when they were pressing the ball, what they did was they kept Kobbie Mainoo to keep track of. Tribe, do you drink alcohol? No, I don't drink alcohol. There is a baby crying. Yeah, it's my neighbor's baby. They're outside in the compound, and I think they had a fight. So, anyways, oh, my noise cancellation may be a notch down. So, anyways, I think you have to look at it this. So, in their counter press, Kobbie Mainoo was tasked with keeping track of Rodrigo Cascante, who they managed to kill out of the game. Then, once they were pressing against that defense, you had the wingers move inwards to fill the void that was left by Kobbie Mainoo, so that Casemiro is not isolated in midfield. So you had Patrick Dogu come inwards and then Amadou Diallo to sort of narrow down, because remember, Manchester City largely play centrally, and then Manchester City were forced to leave that ball to Max Alenya, the 20-year-old centre-back that has been playing alongside Kushanov, to then find a way out. And every time he went long, oftentimes they conceded possession because then United had closed down those spaces. And then even in their own build-up, Manchester United looked smart at it. They looked to put the ball to one side of the pitch, largely that was the Luxor side with Patrick Dogu. And then as soon as you had the concentration of players there, they had a switch of play to Amadou Diallo, this side of Brian Mbeumo. And then they moved the transition on quickly and got to the box of Manchester City. So, however, I think the strategy could be slightly different because this Arsenal side is very flexible. Whichever game you bring them, they are capable of playing against. They themselves are flexible enough to iterate their game. If you want counter-attacking football, they can play that. If you want quick transition football, they can play that. If you want a game where they dominate the ball, they can do that. So the question is, will they be able to break the low block? Because once you play with Togo, the advantage that gives you is that when they are in the defensive, it shifts into a back five because then you have Luke Shaw squeezing to form to be more of a third centre back, and then you have Patrick Dogu add-on to try and deny Bukayo Saka that bit of space with the interplay he normally has with Martin Odegaard and Jurriën Timber. Okay, Joshua says, do you think Rice, Odegaard, and Eze will do better in the middle than a partnership of Rice, Subimendi, and Odegaard? The latter seems to crowd each other out, whereas the former would task Rice to purely play a six. Now, I'll say this. I trust Declan Rice to play as a six, to win the ball back, to do all the donkey's work. Usually when you play with the double pivot of Rice and Zubimendi, because traditionally they're both number sixes and both can play as number eights, you have a bit of caution. But what is loved about Martin Zubimendi is the bit of control that he gives you in that midfield, because you'll have to go back, I think, for the game against Tottenham, and there's another game where you find a lapse of judgment in Martin Zubimendi in not releasing the ball quicker, that he gets caught out possession. So he's good that way. Now, when it comes to playing with Odegaard, Rice, and Eze, I think that gives you more going forward. And what Mikel Arteta seems to do is, first of all, have control. He wants to have that control. He wants to have that bit of clarity about his defensive work. And the reason as to why he also uses the double pivot is because in dominating the game, you end up shifting your back line beyond the midfield line. And for me, it's has always been a reservation, because against a team that can get in behind you, we know that usually center backs are not as quick as you'd have the forwards. So imagine if Amadou Diallo gets in behind, or Brian Mbeumo gets in behind Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba, that bit of pace, we know who is going to win that context of a race in terms of the sprint. So because his team plays that way, he ends up fielding Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi, because one of them at any one point is going to stay in that midfield pocket, to try and help if there's a counter. You remember, I think it was the game against Liverpool. I think Arsenal had gone either for a set piece or something, and it was Declan Rice that had to chase down a cohort of Liverpool players to deny goal scoring opportunity. You remember Mohamed Salah, that sprint. It took Declan Rice to track back. Other defenders had literally given up on the chase. They were out of their legs, So it has that element to it in the thought process of it. But if you want to be more effective going forward, because once you play Ebeleche Eze, first of all, he's going to drift slightly towards the left side to give you an option of play inside that pocket around the left side of the edge of the 18 yards box, and you can create so many moments. You look at the goal, the first goal against Inter Milan. It's Ebeleche Eze who drops the shoulder, passes the ball inwards, I think to Gabi Jesus, who knocks it back to Miles Lewis Kelly, who then plays it across the box for them to create that goal scoring opportunity. So there's that. So playing with Rice and Zubimendi, the control is about the defensive bit of it. When you play with Rice and Odegaard, that control is within the midfield going forward, largely. not defensively. You get. And then when you have Eze there, it gives you more power offensively because the kinds of overloads and the abilities of Eze that gives you will be tremendous. However, like I said, I do not think Mikel Arteta is just a bit too cautious, and sometimes he overthinks the game. Like his master Pep Guardiola. They tend to overthink the game sometimes, but I feel it's a model that you can replicate or that you can try out. However, Declan Rice has to be at the top of his game to do the donkey's work in that midfield. He's capable of doing it. He's done it before. But I do not think Mikel Arteta is going to try that out. You say, Tribe says, let's go to a Uganda game this year. All right. Rice in 6, Odegaard can control the tempo, and Eze does the flashy stuff. Yeah, when you put it that way, yes, that template can work, for Odegaard to control. But like I told you, that control is from the midfield going forward. That's what Odegaard offers you. Now, when you have a Zubimendi and Rice, the control then shifts to the defensive element of it. That's the difference there. But I don't know. I do not know. But but then like also we said, because of the limitations of Eze in terms of the off the ball work, largely in the expansive sense of the pitch, that's where it becomes tricky, because then he knows Martin Odegaard has to quickly track back and find Rice, so that if Rice, let's say, nips a ball in a tackle, then Martin Odegaard is already back to pick up the pieces. Usually, as you've observed, if it's Zubimendi nicking the ball off, then quickly you have Declan Rice collecting, and vice versa. So you have that. So Man United's threat is going to come largely for me from about 3 players: Brani Mbeumo, Bruno Fernandes, Amadou Diallo. Bruno Fernandes has that long pass, executes it really, really well to find his teammate. And then you have the pace of, Mbeumo and Amadou Diallo. If Arsenal overcommit the way they usually push up, and you have, these days you've seen William Saliba being involved literally in build-up play in the middle third of the pitch, where he ventures further forward, and you're thinking to yourself, aren't you leaving yourselves exposed? Because he's pushed high up the pitch to go to that zone where Bukayo Saka usually forms the triangle between him, Martin Odegaard, and Julian Timber, or Ben White. So you have that element of the game. So I feel that Arsenal must not be complacent of the capabilities of Manchester United when it comes to the counter-attack, because that's where the effectiveness will come down to. If they can be able to neutralize that threat, then they will go on to have a good game. My individual prediction has been a 2-1 victory for the Arsenal, because I feel that while it's not going to be an easy game, it will be difficult. I expect Man United to score. For some reason, Arsenal have struggled to keep clean sheets. Forget the goalless draws between Nottingham Forest and against Liverpool, but they've been prone to conceding lately, which wasn't so much the case at the start of the season. So I went for a 2-1 victory for the Arsenal. So the question is, what's your prediction for the fixture? But yeah, those are my thoughts on Man United versus Arsenal. Then I hope Mikel Arteta, and the other advantage is that Mikel Arteta these days, he's alive to the game to make quick substitutions when he needs to. But the other thing I pondered about is playing Noni Madueke in the left wing. Yes, a left-footed player playing on the left. I think, given the way he wants to get to the byline and bring in that cross, but that is dependent. If it is Victor Gyökeres playing, then I think you're good to use a Noni Madueke to that side. And then with Ricardo Carafiori also, in that bit of it, if he's the one playing at left back, we know how they like to get him on the ball, and he puts in that cross. This is our year UTA. What's our UTA? N16 V5J. Thank you so much for being part of the broadcast. So anyways, those are my feelings about that game. But just quickly to remind you about the fixtures that will be coming your way this weekend. That's for match day 23 is that the early kickoff is between West Ham and Sunderland. Then Burnley at 6 p.m. against Tottenham Hotspur, Fulham against Brighton and Hove Albion, as well as Manchester City against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Guys, we did the preview for majority of these games in last night's broadcast. So go to the channel under the live section. You'll look at the live broadcaster from there, and then also another version of the Arsenal versus Man U from the Friday morning live broadcast there. So you can have extended versions of those. Then in the late kickoff of Saturday, Bournemouth take on Liverpool, while on Sunday at 5 p.m. you'll have 3 games. Newcastle against Aston Villa, first leg ended in a goalless draw. Chelsea play away to Crystal Palace, and Nottingham Forest away to Brentford. I went for Brentford win in that one. My predictions again are in that video from last night. And then Arsenal, Manchester City at 7:30 p.m. Then the game will wrap up at Monday Night Football, Everton Leeds United. Before we wrap up this broadcast, we have to take the trip to Spain, where Rio Oviedo take on Barcelona. Now, Pedri is one of our usual suspects on this channel, but Mesqua says 3-1 to the Arsenal. That's his prediction. I hope you've also highlighted in the poll that Arsenal will win. But thank you so much for that contribution, Joshua. So, Barcelona, fresh from that 4-2 victory against Slavia Praha in the UEFA Champions League. They dropped points last weekend when they lost to Real Sociedad by 2-1. I do not think they would want to slip up again, because Real Madrid are bringing down their necks with just a point ahead of them. In fact, by the time their game comes on Sunday, Real Madrid may have already won against Villarreal, as my prediction has been a 3-2 for Real Madrid, that they would have moved above Barcelona with a 2 points lead. So that means that Barcelona need to do everything it takes to win this game. Rio Oviedo, Santi Cazorla, as much as I love him, they've not been good this season. That's why they are bottom of the La Liga standings with 13 points. And I do not anticipate that Barcelona have any plans whatsoever of losing against the bottom side. Not that it can't happen, because in football anything is possible. But yeah, my anticipation is that Barcelona should be able to win that game comfortably well by 4-1, and then have their attention switch back to the UEFA Champions League, where you still have teams fighting to finish within those places of the top 8, where you qualify directly for the round of 16. So those responsibilities are bestowed upon those teams, with Barcelona standing 9th on that table of the UEFA Champions League. So they'll have it at the back of their mind that nothing short of a win against Copenhagen at home, which is at Camp Nou, which is a beautiful thing for them, would guarantee their finish within the top 8, depending on how results go elsewhere. Joshua says, yes, Noni on the left with Gyökeres in is a good idea. Thank you so much about that. So yeah, for Barcelona against Rio Oviedo, really, regardless of their injuries to Ferran Torres, Gavi, Andres Christensen, and Pedri, who appeared to touch his hamstring in that Copenhagen game, even without him, I still think they have enough to win against Rio Oviedo, because you have Frenkie de Jong, you have Pau Kubasi, you have Frenkie de Jong and Marc Casado, who can play in that deploying role. So I'm not concerned, even if they were to miss a Pedri for that particular fixture. I still fancy that they can go ahead and win that game by at least 4-1. Why? For some reason, I always expect Barcelona to concede. I remember when we were doing the preview for the UEFA Champions League, I did say that they would concede against Slavia Praha. Although my prediction had been 3-1, they still conceded 2 goals from set pieces. So that's the kind of a game that I expect for Barcelona. Like I told you guys, on a Sunday, do not miss 2 big games in the Italian Serie A, because Juventus will take on Napoli, while AC Roma have AC Milan there. Inter Milan were in action yesterday against Pisa, and things went well for Inter Milan, but by the 32nd minute of the game, they were 2-0 down. They had to rise from their ruins and won the game by 6 goals to 2. Quite the comeback there that they managed to mount on. I thought, well, this doesn't look pretty, but by halftime, they were leading that game by 3 goals to 2. Perhaps the pandemic of a small team mentality. You have a good moment and then lose your heads. But they won that fixture quite comfortably well yesterday. Anyways, guys, it's been 1 hour and 4 minutes of doing this. I would love us to extend the conversation, but that's the farthest that we can go for today. We shall perhaps engage at 11 p.m. East African time. Provided circumstances are kept constant for our Saturday late night podcast. And then on Sundays, we do not do a morning broadcast, we do a night broadcast. But weekly, on weekdays, we are here every 9 a.m. in the morning, Monday to Friday, as well as, in the evening or in the nights at 11 p.m. onwards, or sometimes even after 11 p.m. in the night. Thank you so much for every single one of you that has been part of this broadcast. Thank you so much, Joshua. Thank you so much, Jesus. Thank you so much, Jody Ricks. Thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Titus Odong, and every single one of you that did participate in our poll. Those of you that have, submitted your comments, that have contributed to the conversations. Those that did not like, those that did not submit a comment, I still appreciate you for sparing the time to be with us. It's been a pleasure. Have yourselves a blessed weekend. Until next time. Bye-bye for now.